Whenever you're ready.
All right. Hi, I'm Gabriela Houston. I'm a Polish UK-based artist and author of Slavic-inspired novels for adults and children. Welcome to my channel where we discuss storytelling in all its forms. It's my belief that storytelling is an intrinsic part of everyone's life, as well as an important part of many professions. On the show, I talk to writers, artists, journalists, researchers, and more about how they use storytelling in their jobs and life. So today on the show, I have ADRIAN M. Gibson. He's an award-winning Canadian SFF author, podcaster, and illustrator, as well as an occasional tattoo artist. In 2021, he created the SFF Addicts podcast, which he co-hosts with fellow authors MJ Kuhn and Greta Kelly. His debut novel is Mushroom Blues. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Gabriela. I'm very excited to be here. Very excited to chat with you. It's always a lovely time.
And congratulations on your debut novel. It
Thank you.
is one of the most unhinged things I've read in the last like, year or something. It was really fun.
You can tell why it works well in self-publishing though, right?
Absolutely. Like we'll get to that. Like the freedom of creative expression in indie publishing. It's really quite refreshing. Compared to at a time when traditional publishing is getting more risk averse, it's really interesting to think. So when I first heard the name of your book, I had absolutely zero idea what to expect. Mushroom Blues. I was like, are we getting New Orleans vibes? Like, what sort of thing are we talking about?
There is some jazz. Yeah, there's some music in there.
Then I saw the cover with two police officers, one mushroom-headed, and I just thought
this is video. I can show this off right here.
Yes, so for people watching a video, so at first I thought it was a hat, but no, it is not a hat. It is a mushroom.
There's
cap.
A mushroom cap right there.
Yeah,
and actually, you can see this is
really good illustration, by the way.
This is Koji right here. So that's just like an older version of him with his mushroom head.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I actually like this type of mushroom. It's called canyon pollen. It's very tasty. I'm in foraging, so yeah, I was.
This particular one on Koji's head is called an ink cap mushroom. So if you look it up, it's like very cool. It looks like it's like literally when it matures to a certain stage, it starts to get like shaggy, and then it's around the rim. Basically looks like it's like bleeding ink, like ink is dripping off of the edges. It's super cool and gnarly.
Amazing. So you're really into mushrooms, but like when obviously this is like front and center all of your bios online. Where did the concept of a mushroom people come from?
I mean, this is the thing. I was actually talking to a friend recently, my friend Noah. He's a bookstagrammer, and he brought up the Mario universe, and this is something that I never explicitly looked at as like an inspiration, but I've been playing Mario games since I was a kid.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like you have Toad, who's this like little mushroom person, and then you have the Goombas, which are these like these mushroom baddies kind of thing. And there's just mushroom shit everywhere. It is called the Mushroom Kingdom after all. And that kind of combined with me growing up on the west coast of British Columbia and just like surrounded by temperate rainforests, I would spend so much time, it's like now it's a bit faux pas for parents to like let their kids just go piss off into the forest for like 3-4 hours, but that's what all of our parents did where I was growing up. They would just be like, oh, go play in the forest with your friends, like grab your bicycle. It felt very much like the adventure movies that
I feel like
that
people
saw in like
living...
the 80s and 90s, like the Goonies and Steven Spielberg kind of thing. But like, yeah, it was just like grab your bike, go play, come back when it's dinner time, and that's all.
Sounds amazing. Sounds like an amazing childhood, honestly.
Yeah. So we spent so much time out in the forest, and I like would find mushrooms all over the place. We would go like turning over logs and looking at bugs and all this different kind of stuff. And mushrooms were just everywhere. It's like a very wet environment. And so yeah, you just stumble across weird stuff. And to me, it's like mushrooms are these strange alien kind of organisms that they're immediately appealing. Obviously, on one hand, it's like, yeah, they're off-putting for a lot of people, but you see those bright colors and the strange shapes and all this different kinds of
Mm.
elements to mushrooms as organisms. And it's not like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. It's kind of like, this is so weird and disgusting that I am just inherently curious, like
I
what's
don't
going on
like
here?
I never thought of capped mushrooms as disgusting, maybe because I grew
Yeah,
up foraging them,
certain
but
ones. Yeah,
mold,
certain ones.
the kind of mushroom
But
that
I
can
think,
grow on the inside of a window, you know,
right.
yeah, but
Yeah, but like your personal heritage, it's like mushrooms is part of your culture, you know,
yeah.
like foraging is a much bigger part of Polish culture and other countries around that part of the
Mm,
world. Like there's just like an inherent cultural association with mushrooms and foraging, and that is part of like the culinary
mm.
tradition and everything. For me, it's like,
In British
no,
Columbia,
like,
it is not like
no, like North America is so weird when it comes to mushrooms. And so for me, it was
yeah.
strictly just finding them in the forest and tearing them apart and like examining them and everything like that.
If it hasn't gone through the industrialized like food processing, it's not safe to
Exactly.
eat. Yeah. It's
It's like like a portobello is like, ooh, that's out there, man. That's pushing it. But you know, that fascination just kind of grew into me learning more about mushrooms on like a biological level, how they fit into ecosystems, studying them and reading them while just like in my off time in
Mm,
high school and university, and then starting to experiment with psychedelics while I was in university as well to understand the ways in which mushrooms interacts with human consciousness is unbelievably fascinating.
mm.
And then after university, actually, at a bookstore in Berlin where I was living at the time, one of the people there introduced me to China Mieville and Jeff Vandermeer. And reading both of those authors just like completely transformed my perception of how literature could like truly incorporate the weirdest parts of a person's passions and personalities. And so like Vandermeer's Annihilation was just a game changer for me and was the single book that made me want to pursue writing more professionally. But also his Ambergris trilogy, which is set in a city, like a fantasy city that's kind of feels a bit Victorian, secondary world, and the humans there are basically colonizers. They colonize the land of these like uh, these these people called the Gray Caps and sent them underground. And then during these books, the Gray Caps start to rise again and recolonize the land that had been taken from them.
Mm.
And so it's really crazy for me to read this book about like mushroom people. And I'm not saying like I am not taking credit for mushroom people at all. This is
Mm.
something that's been around for a long time and is really fascinating. There's even this like crazy Japanese movie from I think like the
See, it's like a
19
whole world of mushroom
yeah,
people.
yeah, it's
I've never heard
insane.
of. Yeah.
I need to find the name of this Japanese movie. It's in black and white. I think it came out in like the 60s or 70s. But it's like this island of like these kind of like body horror mushroom people.
Mm.
So it's not a new thing at all, but I really enjoyed the way Vandermeer, in specifically in his novel Finch, combined noir with fantasy and these mushroom people and exploring the ways in which fungi can kind of like lay the groundwork for really
Mm.
interesting world building. And then after that, I went on a trip to Amsterdam, and it was raining one day.
And you
We
went on a
just
trip. Yeah.
we went on a trip, yeah.
Okay.
During the trip, we went on a trip, and I was basically just like inside, and I brought my sketchbook, and I just started drawing these mushroom people tattoo designs because this is back when I was a tattoo artist, and you know those mushroom people designs kind of really embedded themselves into my
Mm.
psyche. And like up until this day, I think I've tattooed like at least over 30 people over multiple continents with different mushroom people tattoos. I've tattooed one on myself, and that was kind of the basis for what would eventually morph into the foundations of this world that became Hapon and Neo Kanoko, where the fungal people reside in
Mm.
Mushroom Blues.
I mean, in terms of tone of the book as well, like I was wondering how you set on a tone because when I first, you mentioned Mario, right? Mario
Yep.
Bros. And that is, that is all like comedy. And, when I was telling my husband about, reading your book, and I was like, it's like people who are like basically part mushroom and have like mushroom cap. And my husband thought that was like it was going to be a comedy. And he was like,
Right.
oh, is it like a funny book? And I was like, no,
No.
it is not. It's not a funny book. It's,
No, not at
and
all.
from like the first page, you see, it's just you jump straight to gore and like was it like a sort of a very conscious decision for you to sort of juxtapose this kind of something that could be quite humorous and that is
Yeah.
kind of partially maybe inspired by like something quite humorous, and then to have this
I
very
mean,
serious
yeah.
undertone.
When it comes to Mario and the Mushroom Kingdom, that's kind of more like a subconscious influence. So it was not in my mind at all when I was like creating this world. And I was more kind of going into it in the vein of things like The Last of Us, and
Mm.
mushrooms and how it's incorporated into horror. Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia is another fantastic one. Even the short story "The Fall of the House of Usher" by Edgar Allan
Oh yeah,
Poe, in
yeah.
ways that incorporates mushrooms on like a more atmospheric level, like sort of like setting the mood, setting the tone was amazing for me. Like I love that. And then obviously Vandermeer's work and China Miéville's work, and even like the trippier stuff that Philip K. Dick has written. So Mario and like comedy wasn't necessarily in my mind at all. It was
Mm.
not like I'm trying to juxtapose these kinds of moods. It was more so, um, how can I combine the genres that I love with this world that I've created? And so
Mm.
genre blending was kind of the thing that really started to establish the tone and the atmosphere and the mood of the story and the world. So I was like, okay, I have this really weird, trippy world full of like mushroom people and mycelium architecture and, creating their religion and creating their language and all this different kind of stuff to add complexity to them. I'm going to combine that with noir because I really love noir, whether it's film noir or whether it's more
Mm.
like noir novels, like Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett type stuff. Blending like that with murder mystery and crime thrillers. Like I love the work of David Fincher. So if you've ever seen the movie Seven with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman,
Yeah.
oh my God, that movie is so good, but so creepy and so just
I have watched it
um,
once and it was enough. Yeah.
but that movie, it's like it has this really powerful visual atmosphere that's like
Mm.
almost insidious. Like it starts to get inside your head.
I
Um,
don't think there's an almost in there. It's
yeah, it
definitely
definitely does that.
insidious.
So things
Yeah.
like that really, really set the foundation for me to bring in these genres and almost use them as like a framework for the story. So to be like, okay, murder mystery, police procedurals, noir, they have these
Mm.
familiar story structures, these kind of beats that the story can hit in order for the reader to be able to have their expectations at the beginning and be
Mm.
pulled through the story and given that satisfaction knowing when they get to X, Y, and Z. But then I amplified that. So it's like I gave them the familiar, but then I amplified that and made it weirder and darker through the context of the world and through the mushroom stuff that was going on. And then there was also the ability to take something really typical, like an interrogation scene, which like we've all seen so many interrogation scenes or read interrogation scenes where, yeah, I mean, like it feels a bit been there, done
Mm.
that a lot of the time. And so I was like, okay,
Oh yeah.
how can I utilize the fungal world and like the biology of the fungal people and also the necessities of the story and the character
Yeah. I mean,
relationships to
that's a
be able
big
to,
plot point, so let's
yeah.
not spoil,
I won't spoil it,
but
but
it does,
just to
yeah.
raise the intensity, to be able to utilize certain things to, yes, give the reader the satisfaction of like you get this beat that you're really familiar with and you kind of want and expect, but at the same time like amplifying it, making it more intense or kind of like subverting it in certain ways.
I mean, there's definitely something in mushrooms that does lend itself to it in terms of like mushrooms are something that humans cannot control because the
Hmm.
spores are not controllable, essentially.
Yeah.
It's went to a lecture um, on that, on how mushrooms are essentially like the biggest enemy of space travel because we have not figured out a way to stop mushrooms from eating everything on the spaceship, including the seals to
Yeah.
the rubber seals and the metal. Like mushrooms get everywhere,
Yeah.
and you
No,
cannot control that.
it's
Yeah.
crazy. There's like so first of all, it's like when it comes to space, obviously you want everything to be decontaminated and as clean as possible because you're going into unfamiliar environment. It's like, you go into space, and if a fungus that is blind, that is invisible to our eyes, somehow manages to get onto the spacecraft, and there are fungus that eat petroleum, there are fungus that eat, they'll live and survive on like an oil spill,
Yeah.
basically. Like there are so many things that mushrooms can consume
And
and are
also
are
cell
able
for
to
cell.
adapt.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
cell for cell, we are technically more mushroom than we are human, like in
Yeah.
terms
Yeah. I
of
mean,
the
there's so much
mushrooms that
fungi
live
in
inside us
our
and on
guts.
us. And it's
Yeah.
like you can't get rid of them because we actually
Yeah.
can't function without like a lot of them.
Exactly. And
So,
so it's impossible to create like an environment that is completely devoid of fungi and also bacteria.
mm.
And yeah, to go on a spaceship and then like a mushroom, that sounds like a horror novel right there. Like this fungus is starting to devour your spaceship, and you're then susceptible to the vacuum of space. That's terrifying, right?
And
But
that
I love
actually,
that. I love that mushrooms can
yeah,
do that. Like humans are very um, they're very terrified of things that they cannot control. And so I think that's why
yeah.
nature has always posed such an awe-inspiring role in the history of humanity and especially in our
Mm.
storytelling. And so when you have something like mushrooms that this is why I love The Last of Us so much, because it is a
Mm.
zombie story, yes, but it is spread through cordyceps. It's not
Mm.
actually real, like cordyceps cannot do this to a human being, but
For
fiction is fiction.
now.
Fiction is fiction, right?
For now.
So for now, hopefully not. But it's the most terrifying thing is the ways in which this zombie fungal plague spread, and the ways in which humans cannot control something as imperceptible as spores in the air, right?
Mm.
Or the ways in which mycelium creeps into spaces and in ways that we cannot perceive, right? So these things are so far out of our control that it's more and more terrifying, which is why horror works so well with fungi, I think, and why I was very active to incorporate body horror elements into
Mm.
Mushroom Blues.
I was going to ask about this because the structure of the unfamiliar body in as a
Hmm.
source of horror, and uh, you seem to use it like very strategically also to kind of use it to show how like the dehumanizing of an othering
Hmm.
of some, of an unfamiliar body. Um, so is that something that you were like thinking about like that? Because humans are very good at dehumanizing other human beings as we see every day.
Yeah.
And but then you add to it another basically a species that's kind of like us and it seems to be compatible like to in order like they can produce children together,
Hmm.
but yet it has its own biology that is completely alien to us.
Yeah, that was a huge, huge part of the book. Just like the thinking about xenophobia and thinking about alienation and thinking about othering, and the mushroom people were one of my main goals with the book was actually to make the mushroom people feel more human than the humans, to create a deep, nuanced degree of empathy for the fungal people. And the fact that in this book, it's set 2 years after a war where the humans from a particular nation on this planet invade the fungal nation of Hapan, and this story takes place 2 years after the end of this decade-long war. So there's tons and tons of devastation. You don't know in the first book why this war happened, but that is something that starts to become more clarified as the series goes on. But the fact that the humans invaded, and it's kind of like the colonizers' are colonizing what we would typically think of as the colonizers, the mushrooms, the fungal people. And so using that framework to dehumanize the fungal people in the context of the world and what the humans have done to them. They're subjugated, they're treated like dirt, they're subjected to food shortages and pushed into ghettos and different places like this. There's blatant racism from the humans towards the fungal people. And so all of these kind of like dehumanizing interactions, the fact that the main character herself, Henrietta Hoffman, she is a racist and she comes from this culturally and socially ingrained society, sort of like societal perception of the fungal people, that she is racist towards them, she is discriminatory towards them. And so a lot of this book is basically like laying all that groundwork in order to break down her preconceived notions of what she believes, and therefore through her experiences with the fungal people, humanizing them more and more and creating more empathy for them and lessening the alienness of them. But then there are also moments where, you know, especially through body horror and things like that, where you do see these very distinct biological differences and these very horrific possibilities, essentially. But also the beauty in it, because the fungal people are able to communicate with each other empathically through they call it the fungal net, but it's basically just a mycelial network. Think of it kind of like a,
Like in the forest.
yeah, like, but also but like in like a technological context, it's kind of like local hub networks where different people can, you know, send messages to each other or send emojis to each other and that kind of thing. The fungal net is very much like me exploring cyberpunk sort of tropes like brain-to-brain communication and networks and that kind of thing, but through the context of mushrooms and mycology. So those are like, you know, different ends of the spectrum where there's like this fascinating, beautiful forms of connection, but then there's also these like really brutal, horrific biological abilities that they have and the actions that they can take with them.
And I felt like the culture of Japón that you created, it's like all of it seems to be very like Japanese coded, and like even the name Japón is kind of, you know, and like why this choice? Like there's like the mafia that is in Japón is like Yakuza, you know, and it's all everything is very Japanese.
Yeah, so there, I mean, there are elements from different Asian cultures, but for the most part, it's Japanese coded, and that was very purposeful for me, just because I've loved Japan for a long, long time. I've been fascinated by their culture and their history, and I've had the pleasure of visiting Japan and just being like immersed in the culture, and it's unbelievable. Like it's so cool because like growing up in the 90s, I had this. I guess I had this pretty manufactured perception of Japan, specifically through like the anime and stuff that I was watching. Is like I love Pokemon, I love Dragon Ball Z, you know, I love manga and all these different things. Like I started to get introduced to the Studio Ghibli movies and whatnot, and so all of this created this very interested yet fabricated sort of perception facade of what Japan actually is. But then as I got older, same with mushrooms, I started to read more about Japan, started to learn more about Japanese history, Japanese customs, Japanese language, and just the ways in which, you know, like Japanese literature and art, all these different things, and creating a more nuanced understanding of what Japanese culture actually is. And so for me, like approaching it in this book, it's kind of like my love letter to Japan. Like the Japanese people and the fungal people are like my love letter to Japan in the sense that this is me commenting on the historical truths of what happened during World War II and the Allied occupation of Japan afterwards. I'm pulling a lot of parallels from that. But then I'm also infusing the Japanese culture with things that fascinate me most about Japan, whether it's their pantheon of gods and the way Shintoism and Buddhism are incorporated into their culture, but also like their everyday lives and their everyday rituals and practices to the food and like the culinary sort of fabric of Japan.
Mm.
And all of that is kind of like, you know, multi-layered cultural cake,
I
as
mean,
it
I thought
were.
it really worked because in the sense that, like Japanese people have always been, as a not just like an island nation, but a very insular
Yeah,
culture.
exactly.
They were a source of a lot of interest, but also,
Mystery.
exotic, very kind of exotic
Hmm.
sort of concepts like of this, that they were like othering in
Yeah.
themselves, and that people were like in sort of late 19th century where Europe discovered Japanese art, and and that it's like and
Right.
the Impressionists were really inspired by Japanese art, and the kind of, and then there was a fashion for Japanese and Chinese style
Hmm.
furniture and all of that stuff. But at the same time, the Japanese people were seen as we're viewed with suspicion. And of course,
Yep.
after World War II, there was like a lot of enmity towards Japanese
Hmm.
people. And now we have this back to kind of almost like fetishizing Japanese culture. And
Yes. Yep.
and the Japanese culture remains its own thing that if people from outside find it very difficult to truly like understand and kind of live,
Hmm.
because it's its own, and it remains very insular in many ways.
Yeah.
So, and I think that is the source of fascination, isn't it?
Yeah. 100%. Like you nailed it. And it's like like it goes in ebbs and flows. Obviously, there's like yeah, post World War II or like even during World War II. Like many people might not know this, but there were concentration camps in Europe. Yes, for Jews and Poles
Mm.
and different ethnic groups. But there are also concentration camps in the United States for Japanese people. There were internment camps. Actually, George Takei,
Yeah.
he was in Star Trek. I can't remember the name of his character. Um,
Yeah, but he George Takei
someone's
very
gonna know.
famously talking about his
Yep.
family being in
Yeah.
internment camps. Yeah.
But he has a graphic novel that's actually really
Oh, does he?
really really well done about his family's
Mm.
history and his own personal experiences with the concentration camps during World War II in the United States. So if anyone wants to learn more about that, it's incredibly
I didn't
fascinating.
know about it, but it sounds
Um,
really good. Yeah.
and the art is fantastic. The story is really well done. But the thing is, like, there are these ebbs and flows. And the thing is that after the Allied occupation of Japan, um, Japan was kind of set up to be more self-sustaining, be more part of the market economy and the global economy, especially in terms of its like economic relationships to the United States, its military relationships to the United States. And so you see this like economic upswing and boom in Japan until, like the 1970s and 1980s, where it really becomes like a technological and economic powerhouse. And that's when you start to see the fetishism
Mm.
return. And that coincides with something like cyberpunk, which is a genre that I absolutely love and was a big inspiration for the world of mushroom blues. Not necessarily like the technology. Like if you replace the technology with fungi, then there are very direct parallels between my world and a lot of
Mm.
what goes on in cyberpunk. But you start to see in like, like William Gibson's sprawl novels, Blade Runner, the movie, that that fetishization starts to creep back in. And it's kind of like this there's a term for it now, which is like techno orientalism, and it's basically this fetishization of the East Asia and the ways in which technology plays into those cultures. And the thing that bothered me always about the ways that Blade Runner and early cyberpunk infused East Asia and Japan into their stories is that it felt very surface level. It
Mm.
was kind of like it was kind of like the window dressing on the world building. And I was like, this like yeah, like in Blade Runner, Rick Deckard goes and eats at like a noodle stall, while it's raining.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, he's eating noodles, but this adds absolutely nothing to the story. You could have set this scene anywhere else and it would have achieved the same things. But the Oriental fetishization that takes place in this scene adds absolutely nothing to the story or the world. All it tells me is that there's like some Asian inspiration in the culinary scene of future Los Angeles, and that there's like, you know, a very stereotypical kind of fictional Asian man serving you those noodles, you know, with his like long stringy beard, where it's like, okay, this all feels very absurd and you know, nowadays we can look back on it and think like this is just the
Mm.
most blatant cultural appropriation that you could imagine, right?
I don't think even it goes that far. Like it's
Yeah, like
because
it's not
it
even culture. It's just
doesn't.
like it's just like
It's just
bad
like
stereotyping.
it's just the flavor. I mean, noodles, like they're a big part of Japanese way of life. So I'm not going like nothing wrong with
Yeah, yeah,
noodles,
yeah.
but I think but I think it really worked in the book that you had those people who were kind of simultaneously people were kind of fascinated by them and
Hmm.
then acted really sort of repelled by them too. And
Yep.
at the same time, its culture was not, those mushroom people did not actually allow the outsiders in very much to view their culture. So
Hmm.
they remained this big unknown that was either to be feared um, or just to be treated with contempt because when knowledge is not available, people kind
Hmm.
of react in one of two ways: aggression or disgust, isn't it?
Yep. And
But
they start to fabricate their own ideas of like who these people are or like what they practice, what they believe.
hmm,
And you see it through history in terms of propaganda. Like propaganda has been probably the biggest driver of collective thought throughout most human history, where it's like
hmm.
othering and creating this basically campaign, this informational campaign of like who this other person is, like whether you're in Rome, or in the Roman Empire, probably in Rome or one of the larger cities where information was more readily available. And the government was pushing and propagandizing this message of, you know, these are the Goths or these are the Carthaginians, and othering those other people and creating sort of this vision of them as the outsider, the out group, the enemy kind of thing.
Hmm.
That's a propaganda tool that has been used for centuries and in
And it's
millennia,
still used very
and it's
effectively
still used
today.
today. I mean,
Yes.
we're recording this like, you know, the week where everything is going to shit between US
Yeah.
and Israel and Middle Eastern
Let's not go there. It's like
yeah.
it's too much.
It's
It's
just
too
like, oh
much.
my
But
God.
yeah,
Yeah. So it's
it's
like the whole thing with Israel
yeah.
and Iran and the United States and this whole propaganda campaign, you start to see it in mainstream media, probably in the UK, for sure in the United States, where they're starting to ramp up this message of enemy, 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 other, other, other. And who's going to believe that message nowadays? I think
I
it
mean,
is it is it is a really difficult thing to
people
understand. Like,
are historically
okay,
illiterate. Like
yeah.
it's so. I mean, it's so depressingly easy
Hmm.
to recreate the same technique of we're going to attack someone and then if they hit us back and then we say like we attack someone and it's like this is enough, this is now
Hmm.
enough, we've drawn a line under the issue and then like they hit back and they're like,
Hmm.
oh, okay, well
How could they? How could
this
they?
really requires a strong response.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's that kind of and that is being utilized over and over again and people
Hmm.
fall for it over and over again.
But
But
nowadays, I mean, we're in
yeah.
a very weird time where information is readily accessible, but also at the same time, information is very easily manipulated. And so these messages can come in a variety of forms. And for me, when it came to mushroom blues, that was part of why I loved having the fungal net, and the fungal people had their own method of communication on top of spoken language. They can also
Hmm.
kind of emote to each other and understand each other's desires and intentions through emotional signals, basically. But that in and of itself allows them to supersede so much of the messaging and the propaganda, right?
Mm.
But then it also makes them potentially more susceptible to something like groupthink. In the case of, here are these humans who are coming to invade our home,
Yeah, yeah, just passing on
and
anger, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like, and I think with mushrooms, there's this direct correlation to like hive mind, which is a really, um, you know, well played kind of trope and concept in science fiction, but also in fantasy. And so the fungal people, it's like they do have the ability to have this collective consciousness, but there's also a lot of individualism for each fungal person, which is something that for me was important in order to be able to
Mm.
humanize them more, to empathize with them more. Was like, yes, this person is connected to like a grander whole, but they also have their individual intentions, desires, goals,
Mm.
whatever it may be, that makes them different from another fungal person. And one
Yeah.
fungal person may be, starving in the streets and basically having to eat mushrooms to survive in sort of like a cannibalistic kind of way, which is mentioned in the story, to, these kind of Yakuza style gangsters who are capitalizing on the situation, capitalizing on the power vacuums and the resource vacuums that are going on in order to uh, gain more money, gain more power, gain more status, whatever it
Mm.
may be. And so there is a lot of individualism, despite the fact that there is also this collectivism.
Mm. And speaking of sort of communication, sort of touching on that and like, communication and technology, you seem to have made a very deliberate choice to actually limit technology available to the humans, so that everything seems to be have kind of rolled back to the like 1950s, 1950s,
1950s is a
1960s.
stretch. Yeah,
Okay,
it's more
1960s.
like 1980s,
Okay,
1990s.
nice,
Yeah,
nice. Yeah, but
yeah.
it's, people don't have smartphones on thing.
Nope.
Why did you choose to kind of limit the technology available?
So I do have. I mean, partially it was because uh, this book started out as sort of like prequel novella to another series that's taking place in the same world, which is set decades later and is much more like dealing with biotechnology, dealing with technology and networks and corporations and things that you'd more closely associate with cyberpunk and near future science fiction. So there was that, and in my head I had like a kind of an equivalent time frame for when that story would be taking place, and this one just kind of happened to fall into like this like 1980s 1990s equivalent, which interestingly is like a very cool time period. It's like, people have radios, of course. There's like uh, cassette tapes is like the music is infused into the story,
Hmm.
specifically through the character Henrietta, the main character. And she has basically like this cassette collection that she inherited from her father, and that's kind of like her safe place, is to like listen to this music that she and her dad shared. But it's through cassette
Yeah.
tapes, and so
That made me
cassettes.
very nostalgic when I first came to the
Yeah,
UK. I came with a
yeah,
Walkman that was new. I got it for my
yeah.
birthday, and I got
Brilliant.
like my cassette collection. And I
Oh
remember
wow.
someone to me was like, "Why do you have a Walkman?" That's like different because like like CDs are like it's like it was
Yeah.
beginning of MP3 kind of players and
Hmm.
stuff like that. Like they're still expensive, and I was like, "Well, I have a lot of cassettes,
Yeah.
so it makes sense for me to have a cassette player." But
There's
yeah.
a beautiful nostalgia to it though, and
Mm.
that's kind of like that feeds into like the atmosphere and the vibe, like that nostalgic feel of the technology, but also in the sense of murder mystery, um, and police procedural kind of framework. Technology allows for a lot of shortcuts that don't necessarily make for interesting fiction.
Mm.
So you can get around it in a lot of ways. Like I recently watched this show called Department Q on Netflix, which is takes place in Edinburgh, and that is basically like a very modern, like it takes place now, and so you do have technology that plays a part. Everyone's got smartphones, everyone's got cars with GPS and blah blah blah. they navigated that very well and actually incorporated it into aspects of the story, such that it didn't feel like a detractor. It was
Mm.
kind of like it was there when it was necessary, but uh, it didn't create any plot holes and it didn't solve any problems too easily. But in the sense of this world, like I wanted to focus more on in this story specifically, I wanted to focus more on the fungi and
Mm.
the world itself, the setting itself, and how that was kind of used in the investigation, as opposed to making technology like a bigger part of the story and therefore having to figure out a bunch of different loopholes to like, okay, how does this fit in this way?
Yeah.
How can I have this technology but not allow it for me
To solve the issue, like,
to solve like
yeah,
whatever potential issue this character has to come up against. And so I just
yeah.
landed on like 1980s, 1990s, like, there are telephones, there's radio, there's cassette tapes and things like that, but
I feel
it
like
doesn't
for
feel
like,
like a pervasive part of
yeah,
this world.
for mystery, horror, and crime stories, I think there's like then other tropes where like writers seem to be more focused on how to get rid of the technology
Yeah.
rather than incorporate it. It's like, it used to be just like cutting the line, when
Yeah.
they cut the line into your
And it
house, then
and it makes so
things
much
are about
sense.
to go down.
Yeah, it makes so much sense why so many horror stories like, oh, it takes place in the 90s or the 80s or something. Like there's a lot of horror where
Absolutely.
like it goes back in time as
Because
opposed to
then
being set right now.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
then you just have to cut the line and not get rid of 10 smartphones in the house,
Yeah.
It's like
I
somehow.
have to somehow get rid of the Wi-Fi. I don't
And
like it's not
yeah,
as
just kill the phones, kill the phones.
just like I don't know, some fucking EMP device. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But yeah, like
Yeah.
it is a much more um like narratively engaging sort of scenario when technology is not able to solve every single problem. And this is something that like a lot of science fiction authors have to contend with is like how can you incorporate technology into any given scenario, whether it's like space opera in the far future where they have technologies that aren't even invented yet, in which case it is a little bit easier because the more fantastical it is, the easier it is for you to um, get rid of something and replace it with something else, or to change the norms in such a way that it feels natural to that scenario and those characters and that world, without us being like, well, why don't they have phones? And it's like, well, it takes place in like 3423 or something like that. Whereas like near future science fiction, I feel like has to contend with a lot more hurdles on
Yeah.
on a technological level, and especially like near future sci-fi that is set on Earth. It's like, yeah, you have to think about the geopolitics and nations and uh, you know technology and technological trends, market forces, and different aspects of the global economy. Like, if you set a story here,
Mm.
is that country even going to exist at that point? Like, we don't know. So there are a lot more narrative hurdles in that sense. And for me, it was so much easier to be like, yeah, like let's go with nostalgia and like cassettes and
Yeah.
radios and whatnot.
At this point, we don't know what everything's going to look like in
Right.
a year's time.
Right.
Never
Just in a
mind.
year, let alone
Like,
like 30. Oh man.
exactly. So, um, I was going to ask you, so basically, because you've been doing really well with this book. It's been, like I feel like I've seen it in loads of different places, so people are definitely picking it up and reading it. Um, and you self-published it. So
Mhm.
what was did you feel like indie publishing was just intrinsically more welcoming to like an unusual book like this?
Yeah, it's kind of a strange thing because, like I've mentioned China Miéville, I've mentioned Jeff Vandermeer. These are both traditionally published authors, and I feel like maybe, I mean, they came up with the whole like new weird sort of literary movement back in like the early 2000s. So it could have just been like a product of the times and the landscape of publishing at that point, where there were less conglomerates like they are now.
Yeah.
You hear talk of like the big five, and it's like, well, back then it used to be like the mid, however many dozen,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And all of like so many of them have just been scooped up into these larger
Mm.
corporations. So for me, like knowing that this book was definitely more niche, but also through my podcasts, SFF Addicts, like learning from other authors. Like my first episode was with Hugh Howey, and he really just kind of like from the get-go opened my eyes to like self-publishing is something worth considering, and it's not something to be derided or pushed aside as, oh, if you can't make it in trad, then just go self-publish.
Mm.
There's He kind of set me up to start thinking about um, self-publishing as a potential primary path, as a intentional path to take when it
Mm.
comes to publishing. And so over the course of like multiple years of doing the podcast and learning from different authors from self-publishing and also from trad publishing, just like my dreams of I'm gonna go query an agent and blah 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 and get picked up by a trad house and all this kind of stuff started to like fizzle away as I became more and more pragmatic about the circumstances. And
Mm.
so when I really started to push forward with this book, like I knew this is going to be self-published. And every step that I took with that book as a result of that has been very intentional
Mm.
and with the utmost skill that I can possibly bring to it. And now I'm in a position where I have a lot more flexibility. I mean, we were talking before, but like, like me querying agents and stuff like that, just because I'm like, I don't know, like it's worth experimenting with. And I'm doing it in such a way where I have the sort of credentials and the position of
Mm.
this is how my book is done. And I know from talking to friends in trad publishing that my book has done better than a lot of trad books do.
Yeah.
So there is like a very harsh reality to a lot of this, honestly.
Absolutely. I mean, because you also bring not just a good book, but you also bring a lot of knowledge with you,
Yeah.
and that you've gleaned from talking to a lot of successful indie authors. And
Hmm.
I feel like I've definitely been on a journey with my attitude towards self-publishing because, like I told you before, like I worked in traditional publishing for years. And I definitely felt like, yes, I'm sure that there's loads of amazing self-published books out there. I
Hmm.
felt like, but there's 4,000 novels published in the English language every day. And I'm like, how are you going to differentiate yourself? And it just felt like, because there's like those amazing books, and then there's like that tsunami of not so great. And
Middling
like,
to not so great to terrible. Yeah.
yeah. So how do you like put, and I was thinking from my perspective of like, well, if you're not chronically online and you don't know people who you trust to recommend the amazing things, like how do
Hmm.
you actually go and find it? Because I have limited time, like everybody, and like resources. How do you invest in it? And I've definitely sort of come around to seeing the potential, like creative potential in it, and especially in the change in the publishing, like you mentioned, like 20 years ago, like 25 years ago now, and like year 2000. Publishing houses took a lot more risks, and
Hmm.
they were a lot more open to unusual offers, unusual ideas, and they actually promoted them.
Hmm.
Whereas, while publishing is always operated on a blockbuster model, now it seems to, it went from like, someone said, like, 20% top sellers used to pay for the 80%,
Hmm.
not so great selling books, but
Yeah.
publishers acknowledged that bestsellers are made with marketing money and
Yep.
not born out of some kind of meritocratic wonder. And so they were like, this 80% is where the future bestsellers live, and they're going to hone their craft and going to get better. And now it's like 5% top sellers paying for everything else. So
Yeah.
publishers are just like,
That
no,
seems
no,
right.
like let's go with the debuts. Let's go with the debuts.
Hmm.
And it's
But
big.
the downside is like it feels like almost like they're churning through debuts though to see like, okay,
Absolutely.
here's a bunch of here's like a plate of spaghetti, and each piece of spaghetti pasta is a debut author. We're just gonna see which one sticks,
Yeah.
and then we'll pump more and more marketing money into that particular author. So
Absolutely. And it seems to be more and more cookie cutter as well. Like
yep.
basically publishers are really scared of anything that they can't say, oh, I need to have like 10 books lined up that are exactly the same.
Hmm.
And it's something that I'm hearing from so many people, and it's endlessly frustrating, and it's not great for those debut authors who do get picked to be bestsellers
Hmm.
either, to be
Yeah.
honest, because you might get like a one-off big payout, but then you will not be supported on book two.
Yep.
And I mean, sometimes sometimes they do amazingly well and they are supported, but more often than not, I see a lot of people who do very well in book one and then they crash and burn because they get zero support.
Yeah. And it is really unfortunate because a lot of these authors, like we create these stories because we want to elaborate upon them. We don't want to just write standalones all the time, right? It's like
Yeah.
we create a world and there's so much effort that goes into this. And the fact that your world's continued existence relies upon sales figures for the first book.
And often
And
not even that, to be
yeah,
honest. Like
yeah.
publishers kind of have calculated that book one of a series sells really well, and then book
Hmm.
two sells
Yeah,
like a certain
it's like
percentage less.
diminishing returns.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
I know authors. I'm not going to be like naming names because yeah,
We don't want to do
but
that. No.
we don't want to do that. But I know authors who have been with, a certain publisher who made promises and they released a book that was like, on a single book contract that was like,
Hmm.
oh, this is like let's pretend it's a standalone. And it was clearly volume one in the series. It
Hmm.
ended on a cliffhanger. But the publisher was just like, no, 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 give us something new. Right.
Oh no.
And they did it to this person like 3 times.
Three times?
And I had to
No.
sit this person down and I was like, mate, like they don't care about your brand. And
Hmm.
a reader is going to think that you're a flake. A reader
Yeah.
is going to think that you are not delivering on the promises. You have to either, finish something or just go with standalones if you
Hmm.
want to go with a publisher, or you have to self-publish for like things, because readers will blame you. They will not see everything going on behind the scenes and thinking
Hmm.
like, oh, is it the publisher that is not doing the fair job? Like, no, they're going to blame the author. They're going to think like, it's like Game of Thrones. You like Patrick Rothfuss, right? The Name of the
Yeah.
Wind. We'll never see the end of the Name of the Wind. We all know we'll never see the end of it. Like, and it's but like now authors get like really blamed for like based on that, isn't it?
Yeah, but for behind the scenes politics and market forces that are completely outside of that author's control, right? And I think control is probably one of the most appealing things for a lot of people about
Mm.
self-publishing. The fact that you can um, lay out like a complete roadmap for what you want to do in a world or a series, and the fact that you can go through with that and fulfill it. Obviously, in the case of self-published authors, you do need to understand that it's like you're wearing multiple hats, and so you are not just a writer, you are also author. And in terms of writer versus author, I feel like writer is more the creator and the creative, the person who's actually writing the story, and the author is the person who is the face of your brand, basically, and your business.
Mm.
So that author then has to take on the roles of marketing, take on the roles of designer and project manager, and sometimes artists. There are a lot of people who have multiple skills that they can apply to a project.
Mm.
So in the case of my book, like so Felix Ortiz did the cover, but then I did all the design and typography just because I have a
Mm.
background in graphic design. So it's like the title, like my name, the way the spine looks, the way the back looks, but also
Yeah.
the entire interior of the book, and self-publishing gives you the opportunity to be like, well, I want to put artwork at the front of my book because no
Yeah.
publisher would ever give a debut author artwork in their book. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So you do have complete creative control, but you also have to understand like at which point can I apply my skills to this particular part of the process, and is it worth it on like a in terms of time
Mm.
versus is this something that I need to delegate and pay somebody else to do? So something like
Yeah.
cover art, it's like don't skimp on cover art because people do judge books by their cover. So make sure your cover looks good. If you can't do typography and design, then hire someone to do it for you. If you can't
Yeah.
do the interior design of your book, don't just do it in Microsoft Word. Like hire someone to do it or figure out how
Yeah.
to do it yourself. Like there's so many different steps where you have to be really honest with yourself. What can I do realistically such that
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
ends up looking and feeling like the most high quality book product that it can be?
Mm.
Because there are too many books that go out there that don't feel like someone like people have a bad opinions and judgments about self-publishing because so many times they've been burned. Like I pay
Mm.
for this book and I get it and it feels like a cheap product, right? Whether it's the cover, whether it's the design or what have you. The story could be awesome, but if the
Mm.
packaging is terrible, someone will feel soured by that experience. And so
Mm.
it's like make your book look as professional as possible, as equivalent to going to a bookstore and picking something up off the shelf,
Absolutely. And I mean,
right?
like traditional publishers, like, one of my books has like, I know that like I've seen like a couple typos in my book that went through like 3 rounds of
Yeah,
editing and proofreading and
yeah.
whatnot, right? So it can happen in any kind of scenario.
Hmm.
But it's also like, I know that like my father is like a couple of times he kind of bought a self-published book and he said like his story was good, but like, 5 typos on the page and I'm just like, I'm gone,
Yeah.
right?
It's like
So you need
it
to
pulls you out of the
really,
world.
yeah, so it's
Hmm.
like you need to be, yeah, like you say, honest with yourself about what you can achieve and like what you actually need to maybe save up for and like, or
Yep.
barter skills if you have skills to barter, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, from my opinion, like the two things you don't skimp on are cover art and design and editing. So it's like
Mm.
if you're trying to figure out how to budget your book, don't feel like you need to go all in on marketing. I will tell you that to this day, I have probably spent only like $200 on marketing. And
That's amazing. Yeah.
those were just like experiments with, you know, Amazon ads or Facebook ads kind of thing. But then I decided like I'm not going to do it. And so that was like money well spent in terms of seeing how that experiment would go. But I've come to realize like marketing works way better when people hear my voice, they see my face. There's a lot more like online interaction doing stuff like this, or like weird marketing, like sort of like marketing tools like I'm gonna grow mushrooms on my book and then eat them. Like that as like a marketing campaign is like, what? This dude's growing
Oh,
mushrooms on his book?
that's pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to see that, just like go to my website and on the home page you can scroll down and there's like a YouTube embedded video of just like me growing mushrooms on my book. There's so many free things that you can do from a marketing perspective. So maybe don't invest too much in marketing and put more money towards ensuring that your cover looks good and the typography looks professional, that the editing is well done. Like obviously you don't have to go through all the passes that a traditionally published book goes through because that will get developmental editing, that will get line editing and
You
copy
can get
editing and
developmental
proofreading.
editing by having friends
Beta
whose
readers.
opinion you
Yeah,
trust read your
yeah,
book, basically.
yeah. It's like
That's what it is.
develop
Yeah.
a close relationship of these are the friends whose opinions I trust, and they can essentially be like your alpha readers or your beta
Mm.
readers, and that acts as like the litmus test for
The
the
general public.
developmental
Yeah.
flaws of your book, and then after that you can go through and fix your book up again, and after that maybe decide that all I want to spend on editing is someone who's able to do like line editing and proofreading or something like that.
Mm.
Like be very selective and understand like when you can delegate for free or when you can delegate and have to pay someone
Mm.
versus when you can do something yourself.
Yeah.
So it is really difficult to kind of like um, imagine all of the different things that are involved in self-publishing because you are essentially taking on the roles that a publishing house has
Yeah.
dozens of people handling. And so you're just kind of dumping that all on yourself. But you do have to figure out like, okay, what works for me and what doesn't, what can I pay for, what can I get for free or do for free. Like you said, like barter system. There's so many different things that you can do. And then just figuring out, like, honestly, if you release your book and you realize, like, oh shit, there's a typo on like page 15, you can just update your files and then go update. Like, you can update your file in your software and then upload the
Re-upload it,
updated,
yeah.
re-upload it to Amazon KDP or Ingram Spark or wherever you have your book printed, and it will be updated within less than a day. And
Mm.
so everyone who buys your book after that point would no longer have that typo. So you can do these really uh,
Quick
sort of
turnaround things,
yeah,
yeah.
quick turnaround, but like invisible behind the scenes kinds of iterative sort of tweaks that really help to,
Mm.
like some of my early reviews on like Goodreads is like, oh, there's like they actually told me the typos, and I was like, cool, thank you so much, and I went in and changed every single one of them. So you don't have to think about it as such like a detriment. Like,
Mm,
there is a lot more flexibility with the
for
software and the
sure.
tools that you have as a self-published author, that like a trad pub author, the only time you're ever going to get that typo fixed is if that entire print run sells out and they do another print run
Absolutely,
of the
yeah.
same book. So you do have a lot more flexibility and sort of um, ability to update and iterate,
Mm.
which is really, really helpful.
So, speaking of another print run, what's next?
Well, I've actually been working on a novella. So basically, like, the Mushroom Blues is the first book in the Fungal verse, which is my shared universe kind of thing. Kind of if anyone doesn't know what a shared universe is, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a shared universe, or Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere
Oh, Robin
is another
Hobb,
one.
yeah.
Robin Hobb as well. There's so many examples of great shared universes. Blade Runner, which I mentioned earlier, is a shared universe at this point because they have so many comics and movies and different stuff. So the Fungal Verse is my shared universe, and Mushroom Blues is the first book in the Hoffman Report series. And so what I'm doing at this point is kind of focusing on the Hoffman Report, working on a novella that is between book one and book two, and outlining book two. So I'm in the process of moving things forward with the series. The novella is, I mean, we were talking about food earlier and like my love of Japanese cuisine. This is kind of like, this is my love letter to Japanese cuisine in a sense, where it's like I love Anthony Bourdain on one hand and like everything that he created, and I also really love, uh, like food documentaries like Jiro Dreams of Sushi. If you've seen that, or if anyone out there has seen that, if you haven't and you want to basically see like a Japanese, like incredibly talented Japanese chef who's like invested his entire life to sushi, then go check out Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Mm.
It's like Jiro. Um, but this novella is basically like my love letter to cuisine, but mixing things like inspirations like Jiro Dreams of Sushi or Anthony Bourdain, or the show The Bear, if anyone has seen that as well.
Mm.
Just like kitchen culture and all that kind of stuff. And I worked at restaurants, so I know what it's like to be in a kitchen and to work in a kitchen in the front of house or in the back of the house in the kitchen itself. But mix that with like Hong Kong crime thriller kind of vibes, and I think
Look
people will really
forward
enjoy it.
to
Yeah, yeah, you
it.
got that to look forward to in the next few months. Looking to release that probably in the fall, and then book two, the sequel to Mushroom Blues, probably early next year. And then
Fantastic.
I'm also writing a short story that's set thousands of years in the past, kind of like a folktale type thing. And so that'll just
Oh,
be like sign up for my newsletter and you'll get that one for free kind of thing.
oh, amazing. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show,
Thank you, too.
Adrian. And I will post link to Mushroom Blues in the description of the video below. Right. Thank
Thank you.
you.
I appreciate you having me on. It's been wonderful.